Xena stood at the edge of the crystal platform, her fingers tracing the glowing star maps that floated in the air before her. At nearly 8 feet tall, she towered over every other person in her world. While her people, the Etherians, usually grew to about 6 feet, Xena was different, very different. The morning light from their twin suns cast long shadows across the mapping chamber where she worked alone. This was her sanctuary, the one place where her height actually helped instead of hurt. The massive holographic displays that showed distant galaxies and star systems stretched high above the ground. Other Etherians had to use floating platforms, or special tools to reach the upper sections. But Xena could simply reach up and touch them. Her long, slender fingers moved gracefully through the light patterns, adjusting the coordinates of a newly discovered solar system. She had found 17 new star clusters this month alone, more than any other cartographer in the Navigation Guild. But despite her success, she remained an outsider. The sound of footsteps made her look up. 3 of her colleagues entered the chamber, chatting among themselves. When they saw her, their conversation stopped. They nodded politely but kept their distance, walking to the smaller displays on the far side of the room. This happened every day. Xena had grown used to the silence that followed her wherever she went. On Zephyria, their home planet, height mattered more than anything else. The Council of Genetic Harmony had very strict rules about who could have children and who could not. They believed that keeping everyone within certain physical limits would make their species stronger and more stable. When Xena was 20 years old, the council had called her in for her official evaluation. She remembered walking into the gleaming white chamber where 5 council members sat behind a curved desk. They measured her height, recorded her genetic markers, and then delivered their verdict. Incompatible for reproduction, the head counselor had announced, her voice cold and clinical. Your excessive height poses a risk to genetic stability. Any offspring would likely inherit this anomaly, disrupting the careful balance we have maintained for thousands of years. That was 15 years ago, but Xena still remembered how her heart had sunk to her stomach. Every Etherian dreamed of finding a life partner and raising children. It was considered the most important part of their existence. But for Xena, that dream was officially forbidden. She continued her work, lost in thought as she mapped the spiral arms of a distant galaxy. Her apartment was small and located on the outskirts of the capital city, far from the bustling centers where normal-sized Etherians lived and worked. She had chosen it partly for the privacy, but mostly because it was the only place she could afford on her cartographer's salary. The government paid her well for her discoveries, but they made sure she knew she was only valuable for her work. Nothing more. The door chimed, and her supervisor Keth walked in. He was exactly 6 feet tall, the perfect height, according to Etherian standards. His silver hair was pulled back in the traditional style, and his violet eyes showed a mixture of respect and pity when he looked at her. Excellent work on the Andorian sector mapping, he said, keeping a professional distance. The council is very pleased with your discoveries. Thank you, Xena replied, not looking away from her work. I wanted to let you know that we're expecting visitors next week, beings from another world called Earth. They're supposedly very interested in our navigation techniques. This caught Xena's attention. Visitors from another planet were rare. In her 35 years of life, she had never seen an alien species. Will they be coming to the mapping chamber? She asked. Keth hesitated. Well, there will be tours of our facilities, but I think it would be best if you worked from the secondary chamber during their visit. We don't want to complicate things. Xena's shoulders sagged slightly. Even with alien visitors, she was expected to stay hidden. Her presence might make others uncomfortable or raise questions about Etherian society that the council preferred not to answer. I understand, she said quietly. After Keth left, Xena returned to her star maps, but her mind wandered. She often dreamed about the worlds she charted, wondering what kinds of beings lived on those distant planets. Did they have the same strict rules about height and appearance? Were there others like her, too tall or too short or too different to fit in? As the day ended and the twin suns set behind the crystal spires of the city, Xena made her way home through the empty streets. The market squares that buzzed with activity during the day were nearly deserted now. A few Etherians hurried past, their eyes quickly looking away when they noticed her approaching. Her apartment was on the 15th floor of a residential tower. The ceilings were higher here than in most buildings, one of the few advantages of living on the outskirts. She had modified the furniture to fit her height, raising tables and chairs so she didn't have to constantly bend over. That night, as she prepared her evening meal, Xena looked out her window at the star-filled sky. Somewhere out there were the worlds she had mapped, places she would never visit but knew better than anyone else on She had memorized the orbital patterns of thousands of planets, calculated the safe travel routes between distant galaxies, and discovered star systems that no one else even knew existed. Yet here on her own world, she was considered a mistake, a genetic accident that needed to be hidden away. She touched the small pendant she wore around her neck, a gift from her parents before they passed away 10 years ago. They had loved her despite her height, but even they had struggled with the social stigma. Her mother had often cried when neighbors whispered about their defective daughter as she settled into her bed, custom-built to accommodate her long-frame. Xena allowed herself to imagine what it would be like to live somewhere else, a place where being different wasn't a crime, where her height might even be considered normal, or dare she think it, beautiful. She had no way of knowing that in just a few days, visitors from a distant blue planet would arrive and change everything she thought she knew about herself and her place in the universe. The day the humans arrived, Xena watched from her apartment window as their strange silver ship landed in the ceremonial plaza. She had been ordered to stay away from the welcome ceremony, but curiosity got the better of her. Using her mapping equipment, she zoomed in on the plaza from 15 floors above. 3 beings emerged from the ship, and Xena gasped. They looked remarkably similar to Etherians, but their skin was darker, and they moved differently. One of them was particularly tall, almost as tall as some Etherians. The lead figure appeared to be their diplomat, with kind eyes and graying hair at his temples. Dr. Alex Rivera had spent 2 years preparing for this moment. As Earth's lead xenobiologist and diplomatic envoy, he carried the hopes of his entire planet. The Etherians had finally agreed to formal contact after decades of long-distance communication, and Alex knew this meeting could change the course of both civilizations. The welcome ceremony was magnificent. Hundreds of Etherians gathered in the Crystal Plaza, their violet eyes gleaming with curiosity. The Etherian Chancellor, a woman named Vex, stepped forward with traditional greeting gestures. "Welcome to Zephyria, beings of Earth," she said in perfectly translated English. "We are honored to finally meet face to face." Alex bowed respectfully. "The honor is ours, Chancellor Vex. We come in peace and friendship, hoping to learn from your advanced civilization." The next few days were filled with tours and cultural exchanges. Alex visited their libraries, their technology centers, and their artistic districts. Everything fascinated him, but what impressed him most was their advanced navigation system. The Etherians could map star systems with incredible precision, something that would revolutionize Earth's space exploration. On the 4th day, Chancellor Vex led Alex and his team to the Navigation Guild headquarters. "Our cartographers have mapped over 10,000 star systems," she explained proudly. "They are the finest navigators in this sector of the galaxy." As they entered the main mapping chamber, Alex stopped in amazement. Massive holographic displays filled the room, showing detailed maps of distant galaxies. The images floated in the air, rotating slowly and pulsing with different colors to indicate various stellar phenomena. "This is incredible," Alex whispered, stepping closer to examine a particularly complex star cluster. "The detail is extraordinary. Our head cartographer discovered this system just last month," Vex said, along with 16 others. Alex looked around the room, expecting to meet this talented individual, but saw only a few regular-height Etherians working at smaller displays near the walls. "Where is your head cartographer?" he asked. Vex hesitated for just a moment. "She is working in another section today, very busy with new projects." Something in her tone made Alex curious, but he didn't press the issue. Instead, he spent the next hour studying the star maps, taking notes, and asking questions about their mapping techniques. The precision was unlike anything he had ever seen. That evening, Alex couldn't sleep. His mind raced with everything he had learned, but he kept thinking about the missing cartographer. Why hadn't they introduced him to the person responsible for such incredible work? Unable to rest, he decided to take a walk through the guild building. The night security guards knew him by now and simply nodded as he passed. Alex found himself drawn back to the mapping chamber, where a single light still glowed. He pushed open the door quietly and froze. There, standing before the largest display he had ever seen, was the most remarkable being he had encountered on Zephyria. She was incredibly tall, nearly 8 feet, with long silver hair that caught the light from the star maps. Her movements were graceful and confident as she adjusted the holographic coordinates with practiced ease. This had to be the head. Cartographer. Alex watched in fascination as she worked. Her height allowed her to reach sections of the display that he now realized would be impossible for shorter beings to access. She was adding details to a galaxy map that stretched almost to the ceiling, her long fingers dancing through the light, patterns with artistic precision. "Excuse me," Alex said softly, not wanting to startle her. Xena spun around, her violet eyes wide with surprise and fear. She had been so absorbed in her work that she hadn't heard anyone enter. When she saw the humans standing there, her first instinct was to run. She wasn't supposed to be here during the diplomatic visit. "I'm sorry," she said quickly, backing away from the display. "I was just finishing some calculations. I'll leave immediately." "No, please don't go," Alex said, stepping forward with his hands raised peacefully. "I'm Alex Rivera from Earth. Are you the cartographer who created these amazing star maps?" Xena stared at him in shock. No one had ever called her work amazing before, and this alien being, this human, was looking at her with genuine interest and respect, not the usual pity or disgust she was accustomed to. Yes, I mapped the distant systems," she said hesitantly. "Your work is absolutely incredible," Alex continued, his excitement growing. "I've never seen anything like it. The precision, the detail, the way you've catalogued the orbital mechanics of entire galaxy clusters. This is revolutionary." For the first time in years, Xena felt a spark of pride. "You really think so?" "I know so. I'm a scientist myself, and I can recognize genius when I see it." Alex gestured to the massive display above them. "How do you reach those upper sections?" "The detail work up there is extraordinary." Xena looked up at her work, then back at Alex. "I can reach them because of my height," she said simply. "It's one of the few advantages." "Advantages?" Alex looked confused. "What do you mean?" And in that moment, Xena realized that this being from another world had no idea about her society's restrictions. To him, she wasn't a genetic mistake or a social outcast. She was simply a talented cartographer who happened to be tall. "My name is Xena," she said quietly, making a decision that would change both their lives. "Would you like me to show you how the navigation system really works?" Over the next few weeks, Alex found himself returning to the mapping chamber every evening. What started as scientific curiosity had grown into something much deeper. Xena fascinated him not just with her incredible work, but with her gentle wisdom and unique perspective on the universe. They met in secret, always after the official diplomatic meetings ended. Xena would wait until the building was nearly empty, then show Alex parts of Etherian history and culture that no other human had ever seen. Her height, which her society saw as a flaw, became their greatest advantage. "Look at this," Xena whispered one evening, reaching up to touch a section of an ancient holographic archive. The display showed historical records from thousands of years ago. "These are the original Etherian settlement records. Most people can't access them anymore because they're stored so high up." Alex watched in amazement as images of early Etherian civilization appeared before them. But what shocked him most was the diversity he saw. The ancient Etherians came in all different heights and appearances, much more varied than the current population. "Xena, look at this," he said, pointing to a group image. "Some of these early Etherians are as tall as you are. Some are even taller." Xena's eyes widened. She had never seen these particular records before. "That can't be right. The Council teaches us that uniform height has always been our way." They spent hours studying the ancient archives. The evidence was clear. Etherian society had once celebrated diversity. People of all heights had lived together, worked together, and formed families together. The strict height requirements were a relatively recent development, introduced only about 2,000 years ago. "Why would they change?" Alex asked. "Diversity makes species stronger, not weaker. On Earth, we've learned that genetic variety helps us adapt and survive." Xena was quiet for a long moment. "Tell me about Earth," she said finally. "What are your people like?" Alex's face lit up. "We're incredibly diverse. Some humans are short, some are tall. Our skin comes in many different colors. Our hair can be straight or curly. Our eyes can be brown, blue, green, or gray. We speak thousands of different languages and have countless different cultures. And you all live together peacefully?" Xena asked, amazed. "Well, we have our challenges," Alex admitted. "But we've learned that our differences make us stronger. A tall person and a short person might see the same problem from completely different angles and find better solutions together." As they talked, Alex noticed how Xena's whole demeanor changed when she forgot to be self-conscious about her height. She stood straighter, spoke more confidently, and her laugh rang out like music. He found himself looking forward to these evening meetings more than anything else. "I want to show you something special," Xena said one night. "But we'll have to leave the city." They borrowed a small transport vehicle and flew to the ancient ruins outside the capital. The old Etherean temples and monuments stretched toward the sky, their crystal spires reaching incredible heights. Most of them had been abandoned because modern Ethereans couldn't access the upper levels. These were built by our ancestors, Xena explained as they walked through the ruins. The tall ones. She led Alex to a massive temple with intricate carvings covering its walls. Using her height, she reached up and pressed certain symbols in sequence. Suddenly, a hidden chamber opened, revealing a library that hadn't been accessed in centuries. How did you know how to do that? Alex asked in wonder. I've been studying these ruins for years, Xena said. When I was younger, I used to come here to escape the stares and whispers in the city. I realized that I could reach things that others couldn't, so I started exploring. The hidden library contained scrolls and crystal records that documented the true history of Etherean society. They found evidence of a great crisis 2,000 years ago when a disease had nearly wiped out their species. In their panic, the survivors had decided that genetic uniformity would prevent future disasters. They had gradually implemented stricter and stricter breeding rules, eventually creating the rigid system that existed today. They were trying to save our species, Xena said softly. But they went too far. Alex reached out and gently touched her hand. Fear can make people do things that don't make sense, but you're proof that diversity is still valuable. Your height allows you to preserve knowledge that would otherwise be lost forever. The physical contact sent a shock through both of them. Xena had never been touched with such tenderness by anyone except her parents. Alex had never felt such a strong connection to another being, human or otherwise. Alex, Xena said quietly, what happens when your diplomatic mission ends? When you go back to Earth? The question hung in the air between them. Alex had been dreading this moment. His official mission was scheduled to end in just 2 weeks. The thought of leaving Xena behind was becoming unbearable. I don't know, he admitted. But I know I can't imagine going back to my old life and pretending this never happened. Their relationship was becoming impossible to hide. Other Earth had started noticing Alex's frequent absences from diplomatic functions. Worse, some of Xena's colleagues had seen them together and reported it to their supervisors. The next morning, Alex was called to an emergency meeting with Chancellor Vex. Her expression was serious as she sat across from him in her office. Dr. Rivera, she began formally, it has come to my attention that you have been spending time with one of our problematic citizens. I must advise you that this association could damage the diplomatic relationship between our worlds. Alex felt his heart sink, but he kept his expression neutral. I'm not sure what you mean, Chancellor. The individual in question is genetically incompatible with our society. Her presence in your life could send the wrong message about what kinds of beings we consider suitable representatives of our species. And what if I don't consider her problematic? Alex asked quietly. Chancellor Vex leaned forward. Then I would strongly suggest you reconsider your position, Dr. Rivera, for the good of both our worlds. That evening, Alex met Xena in their usual spot, but the joy that had marked their previous encounters was gone. They both knew that their secret was out, and difficult choices lay ahead. The emergency council meeting was called at dawn. Alex stood in the gleaming white chamber where Etherean leaders made their most important decisions. Chancellor Vex sat at the center of the curved table, flanked by 4 other council members. Their violet eyes were cold and unwelcoming. Dr. Rivera, Chancellor Vex began, her voice echoing in the chamber. We have reached a decision regarding your inappropriate association with the genetic anomaly known as Xena. Alex's hands clenched into fists at his sides. Her name is Xena, and she's the most brilliant cartographer I've ever met. That is irrelevant, another council member interrupted. Your behavior threatens the stability of our diplomatic relationship. We are giving you 24 hours to leave Xena. If you refuse, we will consider it an act of aggression and terminate all contact with Earth. The words hit Alex like a physical blow. Everything he had worked for, everything Earth had hoped to achieve through this diplomatic mission, was being destroyed because he had dared to see past their prejudices. And what about Xena? He asked quietly. The anomaly will be relocated to Research Station 7 on the outer moon, Vex replied coldly. There, she can continue her mapping work without disrupting our society. Research Station 7 was essentially a prison. Alex had learned enough about Etherean society to know that beings sent there were never allowed to return. It was their way of removing problems without technically harming anyone. You can't do this to her, Alex said, his voice rising. She's done nothing wrong except be born different. This discussion is over, Vex declared. You have 24 hours. Alex left the council chamber with his mind racing. He had to find Xena and warn her, but first he needed to contact Earth. His communication with the home planet that evening was the most difficult conversation of his career. "You're asking me to abandon the most important diplomatic mission in human history," Director Chen said from the screen, her face showing both concern and frustration. "Alex, think about what you're saying." "I am thinking," Alex replied. "I'm thinking about what kind of people we want to be. If we turn our backs on injustice when we see it, what does that say about us? One person cannot be worth risking our entire future relationship with an advanced civilization." "She's not just one person," Alex said firmly. "She represents everything we claim to believe in: diversity, acceptance, the value of the individual. If we abandon her, we abandon our own values." The conversation ended with Director Chen giving him a direct order to comply with the Etherian demands. Alex turned off the communication device and sat in silence for a long moment. Then he made his choice. He found Xena in the ruins where they had spent so many evenings together. She was sitting on a fallen crystal pillar, staring up at the stars. Even in the dim light, he could see that she had been crying. "They told you," he said, sitting beside her. "Keth came to see me this afternoon. He said I should have known better than to get involved with an alien, that I was being selfish, putting my own desires ahead of our species' needs." Alex felt anger burning in his chest. "You're not selfish. You're the most generous, brilliant person I've ever known." Xena turned to look at him, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "Maybe they're right though. Maybe I am a mistake, a genetic error that should be hidden away." "No," Alex said firmly, taking her hands in his. "Don't let them make you believe that. You are extraordinary, Xena, not despite your differences, but because of them." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, both knowing that this might be their last night together. Finally, Alex spoke the words that had been building in his heart for weeks. "Come with me to Earth." Xena's breath caught. "What? Come with me? Leave this place that has never appreciated you and come to a world where you can be yourself, where your height is just one variation among billions of others." "Alex, I can't. This is my home, my world. Everything I've ever known is here." "I know," he said softly. "I'm not asking you to make this decision lightly, but I am asking you to consider that maybe home isn't a place. Maybe it's being with people who see your true worth." Before Xena could respond, the ground beneath them began to shake. The ancient crystal structures around them started to glow with an ominous red light. In the distance, alarms began to sound across the city. "What's happening?" Alex asked, helping Xena to her feet. Xena's face had gone pale. She pulled out a small device and began scanning the sky. "Oh no," she whispered. "It's a stellar storm, a massive one, heading straight for our system." They rushed back to the city, where chaos was erupting. Etherian citizens were running through the streets in panic. The stellar storm was unlike anything they had experienced before, a massive wave of cosmic energy that could devastate both Zephyria and Earth. At the Navigation Guild, Xena immediately began working on the massive displays, her fingers flying through the holographic controls. Other cartographers tried to help, but they couldn't reach the upper sections where the most critical calculations needed to be made. "I need the full galactic map," Xena called out. "Every star system within 50 light years." "That's impossible," one of her colleagues protested. "The display is too large. No one can work on something that size." "I can," Xena said simply. For the next 12 hours, Xena worked without rest. Her height, the thing that had made her an outcast, was now the only thing that could save both worlds. She calculated orbital mechanics, predicted the storm's path, and designed a solution that seemed impossible. "We need to create a gravitational deflection field," she explained to the gathered scientists and officials. "Using the combined power of both Earth's and Zephyria space stations, we can redirect the storm around both planets." Chancellor Vex, who had been watching the crisis unfold, stepped forward. "Can this plan work?" "It's our only chance," Xena replied, "but it requires perfect coordination between our species, and Dr. Rivera's knowledge of Earth's technology is essential." All eyes turned to Alex, who was supposed to have left the planet hours ago. Chancellor Vex looked at him with something that might have been respect. "Dr. Rivera," she said formally, "will you help us save both our worlds?" Alex looked at Xena, then back at the Chancellor. "Only if Xena leads the operation. She's the only one who can make this work." For the first time in Etherian history, their genetic anomaly became their greatest asset. As the stellar storm approached, Xena stood before the massive displays, orchestrating a desperate plan to save two civilizations, and Alex stood beside her, proving that sometimes the most important diplomatic breakthrough comes not from following rules, but from breaking them. The next 18 hours were the longest in both civilizations' history. Xena worked tirelessly at the massive displays, coordinating with Earth's space stations through Alex's communication equipment. Her calculations had to be perfect. One small error could doom both planets. Adjusting the gravitational field by 0.03 degrees, she called out, her voice hoarse from hours of constant work. Sweat beaded on her forehead as she reached up to modify the uppermost sections of the display that only she could access. Alex stood beside her, translating her instructions into terms that Earth's engineers could understand. Tell Houston to increase power output on the Western array by 15%, he said into his communicator. Chancellor Vex and the entire Etherian Council watched in amazement as their supposed genetic mistake orchestrated the most complex space operation in their history. Other cartographers tried to assist, but they were limited to the lower sections of the displays. Only Xena could see the complete picture. Storm impact in 4 hours, announced one of the technicians. Xena's hands moved faster across the holographic controls. The deflection field was forming, but it needed to be precisely aligned. She had mapped every gravitational influence within 50 light years, calculating how each star and planet would affect the storm's path. It's working, Alex said, watching the readings from both planets. The field is holding. But then alarms started blaring. The stellar storm was larger than anyone had predicted, and it was pulling energy from the deflection field itself, growing stronger as it approached. We need more power, Xena said, her voice tight with stress. Both planets need to channel everything they have into the field generators. That's impossible, one of the council members protested. If we drain our power grid completely, our life support systems will fail. Xena turned to face the council, standing tall despite her exhaustion. Then we'll have to trust each other. Earth and Scifi are working together, sharing our resources, completely. It's the only way. Chancellor Vex looked at Alex. Can your people do this? Can they trust us with control over their power systems? Alex didn't hesitate. Yes, if Xena says it will work, Earth will trust her. For the next 3 hours, something unprecedented happened. The boundaries between the two civilizations dissolved. Human engineers worked alongside Etherian technicians. Earth's power flowed through Zephyrian conduits, while Etherian energy supported human space stations. Xena coordinated it all, her unique perspective allowing her to see patterns that others missed. When the stellar storm finally hit the deflection field, the combined strength of both worlds held. The massive wave of cosmic energy was redirected around the 2 planets, harmlessly dispersing into empty space. As the crisis passed, and normal power was restored, a profound silence fell over the Navigation Guild. Everyone stared at Xena, who was slumped against the display, exhausted but victorious. Chancellor Vex was the first to speak. You saved us all. We saved each other, Xena replied quietly. That's what happens when people work together instead of pushing each other away. In the days that followed, everything changed. The successful cooperation between Earth and Zephyria during the crisis had created a bond that went far deeper than formal diplomacy. But more importantly, the Etherian people had seen their supposed genetic mistake become their greatest hero. Young Etherians began questioning the old restrictions. If someone like Xena could save their entire civilization, maybe being different wasn't something to fear. Support groups formed for other Etherians who had been rejected by the genetic councils. The rigid system that had controlled their society for 2,000 years began to crack. Alex's superiors on Earth were no longer angry about his defiance of orders. The successful mission and the new alliance with Zephyria more than made up for his diplomatic improvisation, but they were surprised when he submitted his resignation. I'm not abandoning Earth, he explained to Director Chen during their final communication. I'm building a bridge between our worlds. Xena made her own difficult decision. Standing in the apartment where she had lived in isolation for so many years, she looked around at the furniture she had modified, the walls that had sheltered her loneliness, the window through which she had gazed at stars she would never visit. I've spent my whole life mapping distant worlds, she told Alex as they packed her few belongings. Maybe it's time I actually saw one. The journey to Earth took several weeks, but for Xena, every moment was a revelation. She had never been off Zephyria before, and seeing her home planet grow smaller in the ship's viewing port was both terrifying and liberating. When they arrived on Earth, Xena experienced something she had never known: acceptance. Her height, which had made her a freak on Zephyria, was simply one variation among billions on Earth. Humans came in every possible combination of height, skin color, hair texture, and body type. No one stared at her. No one whispered about genetic Mistakes. Alex took her to meet his colleagues at the International Space Research Center, where her knowledge of stellar cartography was received with excitement and respect. Within months, she was leading the newly created Department of Interstellar Navigation, combining Etherian techniques with human technology to create breakthrough discoveries. Their first major project was establishing permanent communication networks between Earth and Zephyr. Xena's mapping skills allowed them to find the most efficient routes through space, while Alex's diplomatic experience helped coordinate the technical cooperation between both worlds. But the real breakthrough came 2 years later. When their daughter was born, little Nova was a perfect blend of both species, standing taller than most humans but shorter than most Etherians. Her eyes were the violet of her mother's people, but her hair was the dark brown of her father's. She had inherited Xena's spatial intelligence and Alex's ability to connect with people from different backgrounds. "She's beautiful," Alex whispered, holding his daughter for the first time. "She's perfect," Xena agreed, tears of joy streaming down her face, "and she'll never have to hide who she is." Nova grew up in a world where diversity was celebrated, where her mixed heritage was seen as a gift rather than a problem. She spoke both human languages and Etherian, learned to navigate both Earth's chaotic streets and Zephyria's crystal spires, and showed an early aptitude for the kind of bridge building her parents had pioneered. By her 5th birthday, Nova was already helping translate between visiting Etherian children and human classmates. The cultural exchange programs that Alex and Xena had established were bringing young people from both worlds together, creating friendships that would last lifetimes. The changes on Zephyria were slower but steady. The genetic restrictions were gradually relaxed, and Etherians who had been outcasts for their differences began finding acceptance. Some even applied to study on Earth, where they could experience a society that valued individuality. One evening, as they watched Nova play in their garden with children from both worlds, Xena received a message that made her smile. It was from a young Etherian woman who had been deemed too short for reproduction, asking if she could come to Earth to study at Xena's institute. "Look at that," Alex said, reading over her shoulder. "Another bridge being built." Xena leaned against him, watching their daughter chase butterflies with her friends. "I used to think being different was a curse," she said softly. "Now I know it was a gift. It just took me a while to find the right place to unwrap it." As the twin suns of Zephyria set behind Earth's mountains, 3 generations of change played out in one small garden: the outcast who became a hero, the diplomat who chose love over duty, and the child who would never have to choose between being herself and being accepted.